Yeah, okay. So I wanted to have this conversation because, first of all, let me bring this down because I feel like Miss Potato Head. I wanted to have this conversation because a lot of our work is like about social deconstruction, right? And so I feel like a lot of the times the Black and Brown community hold up homophobic standards, and I think it's time we talk about it because I think that as women as well, we hold up things and narratives that are not conducive to the community and they can be harmful, right? And so I felt like in order for me to be an ally, I can't speak to an experience I've never had. So to be real, I was like, let me find someone that I feel like is not only has the terminology for it, but they have that lived experience and they can educate us both or all to, advance the community. And that's real shit. So I want to welcome my motherfucking cousin Niel. But first of all, let me go ahead and introduce himself and give him his proper credit. So, Niel is a political scientist, minister, and research aspirant with focuses on the interaction of race, ethnicity, gender, and Black and Brown political behavior and opinion. He employs quantitative, qualitative, and mixed methodologies in his work to observe social, political relationships of interest. His Audacity has, as a minister, first generation student, political science student, and community organizers are emblematic of his vocational pursuits in the fields of civil rights, Black and Latino amelioration, and research. In this spirit, Niel has maintained perfect academic standing, routinely involved himself in leadership efforts for political liberation, and made part of and led over 20 organizations. Additionally, Niel has been awarded for his contributions to diversity and representation with numerous honors, distinction, and has been featured across different political outlets. He is set to graduate from the University of Houston. Shout out. Period. This spring, and will move on to pursue his dual JD PhD degree at a Tier 1 research institution. Niel has acquired and is in the process of acquiring certifications from institutions like Duke University, Stanford University, and the University of London. Shout out to you, cousin. Welcome in. Welcome in.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.
Ample introduction. We're about to get into something.
We're about to get into it. We're about to address some things.
Okay.
So without further ado, the first question. For those of us who don't know, who've never really heard of the word, maybe we have heard of the word, we just don't know, how it applies to us. What is homophobia?
Okay. We going there. First of all, I think it's important that we're doing the labor to mostly before anything, and you gave this introduction to me, and people, I'm assuming, know who you are on your platform. I want to say that it's important that we begin with questions like this, because if we are invariably in spaces like these, right? This is normalcy to us, right? This is quotidian life to us. We hear these, throw them around, and we sort of know what they mean. But part of our duty, or I guess what we've tasked ourselves with, is coming into these spaces to sort of create these ascriptions and name these things head on, right? And we talked about this in the past too. That's why you go to therapy, right? That's why you read books, because although you may understand some of these behaviors and attitudes, you might even know, like, okay, this behavior or this event happened for this reason and this caused this. Although you might know that in your mind, until it is ascribed, until you hear a particular term for it, that creates a level of enlightenment that perhaps you weren't privy to before that. So I wanted to preface this conversation, and I'm about to answer this question about what homophobia means explicitly with that in mind. Because at the end of all of these fancy, terminologies, at the end of a lot of the work that it is that we do in our lives, are people's life experiences, are people's livelihood. And that should matter for mostly, right? That is the optimum. That is what should matter, is people's livelihoods, people's experiences. Although I might not know that I'm espousing this particular behavior or that I'm a recipient of it, What I do know is what I feel, right? And what I feel is that y'all ain't shit, right? So preface this whole conversation with that in mind.
Yeah.
Now, explicitly, what is homophobia? So there are a plethora of definitions out there, and there's much literature. So this is a very rudimentary term, right? We hear this everywhere, but explicitly, it is any kind of disdain, hatred, or negative attitude perpetrated towards somebody of a homosexual identity, right? The sexual orientation, homosexuality, and it has also been used as an overarching term to address violence that has been perpetrated towards people of queer identities or LGBTQ plus identities. I know that people sometimes get caught up in the phobia of it all,
Mm-hmm.
especially growing up in the hood. You know, you hear, well, what am I? Phobia implies that you're fearful of something, that you're scared of something. I'm not fearful of anything. I'm not fearful of queer individuals. I don't care. Like, I'm not scared. What am I to be scared about? Well, the term it's not necessarily limited to a brand of fear, right? The same way we use different terminologies that have implicit and explicit connotations and meanings. You know, it's language, it's ever evolving, it's malleable, and I think it's been adopted by a particular group of individuals to sort of take on this brand of hatred and this brand of disdain and attitudes that have been perpetrated against them. So explicitly what it means, girl, is just any negative hatred, disdain, and towards this particular group of individuals that is manifested either through actual acts, right, like violence, um, or it can also be manifested like uh, introspectively, right? You can internalize some feelings and some beliefs that, by consequence, are homophobic. So I think that answers that question.
Yeah. Hold on. Let
Yeah,
me. Okay. Never mind. You can see me though, right?
yeah, I can see.
Okay. So, and you know what? People do say, "Oh, I'm not afraid of queer people. I'm not," but to some degree you are, though. You're afraid of your son coming out more feminine. You're afraid of someone peeping inside of you that have that more feminine side that you have not addressed. But you know, we moving too fast. Let's go back to the doc. Let's go back to the doc. Okay, so I think you already answered this. How do people engage in homophobia, whether that be blatantly or, not so blatantly? And I think a lot of it is subconscious.
Right.
And we don't even have to talk about the blatant homophobia. We see it. Boost.
Right. Yeah, yeah. A lot of these things, like these isms, racism, exist on this continuum, right? That means there are very blatant, what you said, I'm gonna take your time, very blatant manifestations of them, as well as like not so blatant manifestations of homophobia. And the reality is that because we live in this contemporary world that we do, is that a lot of the homophobia that probably most people experience is innocuous, right? Or obtrusive, right? People engage in homophobia in unobtrusive or what they feel is innocuous, right? Or what might be unbeknownst to them. So I think a lot of that is how people engage in homophobia, as well as, you know, just feelings, sentiments, right? That are manifested via somebody's language or via somebody's actions. So something as, I don't know, as incalculate as like elevator with a person who is feminine presenting is as homophobic, right, as calling someone a faggot, right? Like, not necessarily as homophobic, but those are equitable manifestations of homophobia in somebody, right? Perpetrated on somebody. And you don't even need to actively perpetrate homophobia towards somebody. A lot of the engagement we do with homophobia is internalized, which I've known we've had conversation about in the past, and it's a manner of checking and bringing yourself to question or evaluating your your internal thoughts and where you stand as far as, you know, your opinions about this particular group of people.
Yeah. I would say one of the ways, like one example that I seen on Facebook a couple weeks ago was that this black man had basically abused his girlfriend, and somebody reposted it, but the caption read, "That's because he's gay." And I was like, that is so problematic, because you're basically saying without saying that gay people are violent, or people are violent because they're gay. And that's not what we're doing. We got to stop that. That's another way of people showing homophobia.
Exactly. Yeah, that would be what I would refer to as perhaps an implicit manifestation of homophobia that that person may or may not have been aware of. And it's equally as damaging and
Right.
problematic. Uh,
And I'm
and
pretty sure that person, when they said it, they didn't mean no harm, but your intentions doesn't really matter when the impact is greater. You feel
period.
me? So yeah.
Period. Free the girls.
The
Yeah,
end.
yeah.
The end. So the next question: what is misogyny?
Ooh. Mm. So I do gender work. I do gender research as well. Um, I would say, and you can say something because I know this might also be a strong suit of yours, that misogyny is any prejudice, feeling, or belief that is perpetrated against women, and those beliefs, right, manifest themselves in acts of
Yeah.
sexism, and they are typically discriminatory and they target women
Mm-hmm.
improportionately. So I think it is important to make sure that people understand that misogyny, in particular, are beliefs and prejudices, right? So already inherently in it in its nature, misogyny is internalized, right? That's already something uh, that is held on an individual
From,
basis and can manifest.
from birth.
Yeah,
From birth.
but yeah, that's how I would answer your question. What do you think?
I think it's the same thing. I have also started using the term anything that puts limits on the feminine, anything that is not masculine to me,
Right.
right? Because even with men who are feminine presenting, they still experience that type of misogyny within other communities, right? So I feel like it's not even just women, even though it is predominantly a woman's issue, it's a feminine issue as well.
I would agree. Yeah, I believe that because feminine people across the board sort of embrace their femininity, and femininity is well regarded as like a woman trait or characteristically ascribed to women. I believe that feminine presenting people can be recipients of misogyny, unbeknownstly or even beknownstly. So yeah, I would agree.
And which we kind of covered a little bit, how are homophobia and misogyny, how is that intersected? How do the dots connect?
What's funny is that all are intersected, right? All these things are interlaced in their very nature, and they're all meant to work together. They're all meant to work in cohesion. They're all coherently connected.
Yeah.
um, Baseline. They are first and foremost, they are terms that are used to describe human and social behavior. So there are social deficits to begin with, right? And I would go as far as to say that people engage in these two things, these two behaviors, these attitudes, these two things from a social positionality or a social standing, right? We live in society, right? And we create things, and we decide what we feel is wrong, what we feel is right. And a lot of that, if you think about it, is made up, right? And so are our hierarchies of social standing and positionality. So I think in order to espouse both homophobia and misogyny, you have to stand in a positionality where you feel you are either superior to the person that embraces these characteristics or lives in that particular truth, or that you just simply disdain them, right? I think also, and I don't want to go on too long, misogyny in its nature, we kind of touched on this, you said it, misogyny in its nature holds that men are socially superior than women. So misogyny on one hand would say, and this might be an extreme example, would say women are weak, right? That's just an example, right? Homophobia would then take that and say, because you are feminine and you are acting like a woman and you are a man, not a woman, you are too weak, right? So you you see, okay, you see the disdain for feminine manifested in both brands of hatred. So I think all of these things that aim to disenfranchise any particular community with a level of malignancy and with a level of execration aim to be interwoven too. They aim to work together. They
Mm-hmm.
to disenfranchise together. They best friends, sister cousins.
And that's why we needed to talk about them both together. That's why when I thought about it, I was like, you can't talk about one without the other because they're cousins, like you said. They relatives.
They like me and you.
Period.
But yeah.
Yeah, and I also wanted to bring about how you said that, intrinsically, what misogyny does, it says that men are superior to women. And I also wanted to say how there are levels to oppression, right? So we could say that, okay, black people are oppressed by white people, or we could say women are oppressed by men. But, like, let's also remember that we have some privileges as straight people, as heterosexual people. And though you may have your own oppression, remember that you also have privileges above someone else.
Mm-hmm. At all.
Right?
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of times we forget that and we don't think that we can be oppressive, but we are.
Ooh.
Gotta look in the mirror. Gotta look in the mirror. You gotta check yourself. You know what I'm saying? So it all starts, the call is coming from inside the house. It's time to start looking in the mirror, babe.
All the time. Me and you had this conversation all the time, and I think I remember in the past speaking with you and some other friends at one point, and noting that we often exist under this understanding that perhaps women or people of color or even black people or people are, can't perpetrate homophobia because they have sort of commonality rooted in marginalized. Maybe that's not true.
No.
Mm-mm. Some of
We
y'all beat them.
struggle the same, but there's a lot of areas that we don't struggle the same.
Nope, baby. And some of y'all is the most homophobic. Let's get into it.
And don't want to address it. Child. Anyway, so, okay, what is internalized misogyny from a woman's point of view? And I was having a hard time putting it into words, so maybe you can help me with this, but I know from personal experience, internalized misogyny for me early in my womanhood was centering my desires around men unconsciously. It was being groomed to be a mom off bat, being groomed to be a wife off bat, being groomed to be chosen, which is where the pick me narrative comes from. It was being groomed to be dressed and curvy and like all of these things for the male gaze without even considering what my desires were and who I was and what I wanted to be. Right. And so, yeah, maybe you could piggyback off that.
Well, it sounds like I've said this word so many times. I'm actually getting tired of saying it. It sounds like those are reverberative manifestations of misogyny that happen due to some varying influence outside of yourself, right? We talk about these things are social deficits and they exist solely on a social standing and a social context. That is because we are socialized beings. I've said the word social like 50 times now.
Because why we're socially deconstructing. Yes, absolutely.
Exactly, yes. So it sounds like these things don't happen outside of social pressures or socialization, right? And people like to think that identities, that, I don't know, this might be a little off topic. People are like, oh, well, you're taught to be gay, or you're taught to be feminine, or you're taught to be masculine. No, baby, what you are taught is these particular attitudes that you are being participatory in, and that have a permeative effect on you, your loved ones, and anybody you are in vicinity and community with.
Yeah.
That I experienced that firsthand. With centering malehood and centering just men and male complexes in your psyche, in your way of thinking. And it's important that you're doing the labor to sort of deconstruct those, because half the job is acknowledging them, right? And that's very hard to bring ourselves to sometimes.
Yeah. And I was wondering what that would look like. What does acknowledging it first, but also dismantling it within yourself, starting from within? And how does that look like on your journey?
Oh shit, I see a fucking spider next
Oh
to
my
me.
God.
Oop. I'm sorry, I don't do spiders.
Go ahead and kill it, cousin.
Hell no. I'm gonna just scoot on over. Hey,
You finna be on edge this whole lot.
girl, because that mug is big too. I'm sorry, y'all. Let me answer your question. Your question was, how do we do the work of dismantling it from the beginning, or what would you?
From within, yeah. And what was your experience like dismantling
Massage.
misogyny from?
Right. Well, I want to sort of preface that by saying that I am also um, not absolved of espousing misogyny, right? Because I am invariably informed by my malehood, right? Irrespective of what people I'm still a man, right? And my psyche is trained and is conditioned as a man. So I think the work begins, and we can talk about this a little later as well. I know you might have a question regarding this. The work begins shortening the distance betwixt you and these realities. And what I mean by that is um, understanding that understanding that there are constructs and there are deficits out there in the world that are influential, and begin to sort of note what is more influential within your life, right? What is you pick up patterns, right? And you also surround yourself with people who do the labor of calling these things out, right? And begin to surround yourself with these individuals like yourself, right? These people will bring into question some of these behaviors, right? And that sort of like rings a bell. Oh, well, am I actively participating in this, right? Am I doing this? But I think it would also be, and I'm going on a tangent here, I think it might also be a tad bit more difficult if you don't have those people, right? If you exist in a very monodisciplinary, like very one branded type of lifestyle.
Yeah, everybody's thinking, living the same. You probably wouldn't even think what you're doing is problematic. You probably think that's just how it is. It's natural to you. But again, social deconstruction is just that. It's knowing that what we know, like the question of that is, how do we know what we know? How do we know that red means stop, green means go? We made that up. That was a structure. That was a system that we abide by so that everyone could fall into place. Homophobia, misogyny, racism, all of these things are not dismissed from that. It's still a construct that we all have to follow to stay in line. It's the same principle, no matter how you flip it. So you have to expose yourself to different realities, whether it makes you uncomfortable or not. The point is to not be so sheltered up in your own box that you forget that other people and other lives, other realities exist. Because that I feel like that is what makes people so. I know you're not looking at that spider.
So sorry, you sit up here.
No. But I feel like that's where people lose empathy for others. Because had you known, had you sat with someone, had you talked to someone and treated them as though they were another human being, which they are, you would have a lot more compassion. You would have a lot more empathy. You would have a lot more understanding. Even if you don't agree, you don't have to agree. That's not your place. Have respect and understand.
I think we should also hold a regard for people who are just stuck in their ways too.
True.
Like, there are people who are committed to willful ignorance, right? There are people who are 10 toes down, committed to their bigotry, to their foolishness, to their buffoonery. Don't give not 1, 2, 3, 4 fucks about doing the labor of changing.
Yeah.
So there's something to be said about that, for whatever it's worth. And yeah, you're right. A lot of it stems because social things, social constructs exist on a communal basis, right? So it makes sense for you to deconstruct these deficits that are permeative, for you to also surround yourself in community to do that work, right? Because at the end of the day, you can do all the work you want to do individually. I can sit up here in my room, kill this spider, and do my work. Like, girl, this spider. All the work that I do, but if I'm not actively participating in that labor in a communal effort, right? In company, right? As a movement, even I would go as far as to say, not much is being done. Like, yeah. So yeah, I would agree with you. Absolutely.
Yeah, and for those who don't know where to even start, and maybe you're not surrounded by the type of people like that think like us, YouTube is full of commentators and people who provide video essays. Like, I'm trying to I'm trying to remember how I got my like first, taste of damn. So like go on YouTube, look up like different things that you normally wouldn't look up. You know what I'm saying? And you eventually start becoming comfortable more and more with the conversations. And for starters, listen to understand. Don't listen to respond as soon as you hear something that you don't like.
Absolutely.
Just listen to understand.
That's all it begins with. Honestly, if we could go back and answer this question and start off, I would start off with that. Listen to understand. A lot of the listening is a virtue, right? Shout out to my father. That's something he deeply inculcated in my mind. Is listening is a virtue, and that came with a whole bunch of things. But for what it's worth, he was right. Listening, right? A lot of this begins with listening. Before there's even a response. And sometimes you can listen and not have a response, right? Like, that's okay as well. Can you see my face, or you just see like the top of my head?
I can see your face. Like, it cuts off at your chin.
Hold on, I'm gonna fix this because this has been pissing me off. But I got my little church thing.
Period. But yes, you got 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. That's what I've been told. Okay, how does race interact with misogyny and homophobia?
Ooh! Race and misogyny interact with homophobia. The real question is, how does race interact with misogyny and homophobia? Because I think race is an all-informative thing. We exist in a racialized context. Yeah. This is a as the race squaller. This is a loaded question because I've done some work. Obviously, you mentioned earlier at their interaction, but the content that is relevant to us and the people who perhaps are watching it, are likely Black and brown people, or people of color more generally. When Black and brown people espouse this rhetoric or these things, they don't belong to us to begin with, right?
We didn't invent it. It did not come from us. It did not
come from us. So it did not belong to us in the first place. Hear this. When we do act engage in it, we bear the consequences of these things in their most adverse and severe form. And that is what a lot of people don't understand is who do you think bears the brunt of these deficits and these social complexities? As a black person, as a brown person, baby, you do,
Yeah.
right? You do. I think that's one way back with those two things. I would also say that if I can think off the top of my head, whiteness and malehood, um, and these other things like heteronormativity, whiteness, malehood, they don't stop existing. They don't stop existing when you are these other things, right? You've alluded to this earlier. These aren't mutually exclusive. Like they don't exist in a mutually exclusive fashion,
Yeah.
right? So all the while you can espouse racism, you could also actively participate in something like homophobia, right? Um, and also the literature that I've done, I've actually written about this, is the racism that black women in particular, right? Black women face are is subject to racism, right? So there's this racialized, and I know you've read about this too. Black women, I would even say brown women, are subject to misogynoir. There's a difference between misogyny and misogynoir that is racialized in nature. So never do you stop existing as black and as a woman separately, right? So if you are to experience misogyny, you will experience those things in cohesion. And on top of that, the same way racism leads to homophobia and misogyny is panoptic. And what I mean by that is it's wide, right? Meaning that no race is innocent of aiding or abetting in homophobia or misogyny, right? No race is absolved from participating in these constructs. And I think that's what we often forget. And I think also my community, right, and this is speaking from one axis of my identity as in being queer, um, has a hard time acknowledging the fact that these people can love you and these people can understand your plight and your trajectory as far as through your gender trajectory, right? And all the while be homophobic or be misogynistic towards you. So yeah, I think the idea that it's panoptic, that it's wide, that it's overarching, over encompassing, right? It knows no racial bounds is something that is important to note, as well as these things exist on a continuum and they exist in cohesion, and you can participate in these things simultaneously. They aren't mutually exclusive.
Right. Right. I love that. Also, I read a book called When God Was a Woman, and the book goes into archaeologists, and like basically the book has receipts on what religion and spirituality was like pre-patriarchal cultures, right? Or patriarchal dogmatic religion. And when the Vikings came, or whoever they were, when they decided that man was the way, man was the system, man was the religion, they also decided that light was better than dark, hence colorism. They also decided that they basically invented homophobia. So yeah, you're right. It did not come from us. Like, I want to preface this. It did not come from communities of color, black and brown color. That was not us.
That was not us, Bookie. And the fact
We
is,
did not invent that.
not us, Bookie. We're absolved from it because even though it's not us, today, contemporarily, y'all be the main ones, and you bear the consequences of the things in their most severe and adverse form. You bear the consequences of homophobic rhetoric, of hateful, disdainful rhetoric, and the implications that these things have firsthand because you are at a social disadvantage, right? Or you've been made to be at a social disadvantage, right? So,
Yeah. And the other thing that I wanted to touch on briefly was that we know we've already touched on the fact that misogyny is low key femphobic. It's colonial
that,
ideologies. Thank you. Yes,
right,
ma'am. Hallelujah.
friend.
Did your homework. But we've collectively understood how misogyny is femphobic. It is against anything that's feminine, right? And so if we say shit like, "Oh, he's sassy," "Oh, he's feminine," "Oh, he's too tapped into his feminine energy," which I think is ignorant. I would want a man who's tapped into that side of his energy, because that means he'll be more emotionally available. That would mean he would resonate with me. That would mean he'll be more empathetic, because a lot of y'all date niggas who have no empathy for you. But I won't go into that. When we say shit like that, what are we saying about the feminine? I'll wait. Because you're already degrading the feminine energy that you yourself have. And you don't realize how it's internalized. You really don't? Okay.
What's
Okay.
not clicking, Steven?
What's not clicking, Jessica? Anyway, child. Okay, the separation of masculine and feminine energy from a spiritual point of view. I wanted you, after you get done saying what you're saying, I also want you to go into how, what they look like in the spiritual societies back in the day, like pre-patriarchal structures, pre-colonial, takeover, all of that.
Somebody just texted me. You're not supposed to be drinking coffee. This ain't coffee. This chai latte. First of all.
Thanks for tuning in, though.
Thank you for policing my diet. But your question was, just describing energies, masculine and feminine energies from the spirit, and then
the separation of the two,
and then going back to colonial conceptions,
right?
understandings.
The duality of how priestesses and priests had both. They honored both energies.
Right. Absolutely.
That's what made them powerful.
Absolutely. I think just for the sake of clearing it up and, prefacing this with like a very well delineated understanding of what these two things are. Mostly, we subscribe to a particular brand of spirituality, right? Me and you, right? So this is my opinion. From spoken to you, you also hold this to be true in your life, right? There is a such thing. Well, you said this earlier, and I want to say this first. These phobias and these concepts are so deeply imbued and incalculated in our communities. For me as a Latino, right, as well, because of religion and state and governmental, right, and that's what you just said, right? Pre-colonial, pre-conquest, Janae said colonial
right.
Ideologies, right? So these were part of that at one point. But that being said, spiritual world, right, what we subscribe to, me and you subscribe to, is that there's a such thing as divine feminine and divine masculine, right? And there are a lot of people who knows what that means, but for anybody who doesn't know what that means, these are energies, right, that ought to be equitably present or manifested in somebody for them to be a balanced individual, right? I am of the belief, or I subscribe to the belief, that we have both a corporal body and a non-corporal body, right? And our corporal body is a vessel for energies, a vessel for spirit, a vessel for light, a vessel for dark, a vessel for low, a vessel for high energies. Or if you subscribe to angels, demons, right? Our corporal body is a vessel for energies. In that same thread, we are vessels for divine feminine and divine masculine, right? And the divine masculine is typically regarded as, attributes that are rooted in logic, in reason, in leadership, and objectivity, and and things things like that. I think people typically can know what that is, right? And divine feminine are attributes, energies that are attributed to things like, having a nurturing spirit, being patient, being gentle, being emotive, being emotionally in tune, right? And these things, before we had any binary understanding of how life in human and corporal physical things interacted and worked, these things existed in individuals regardless of gender, right? Regardless of sex identities, and they manifest in larger settings as well. I am of the belief that masculine and feminine energies alike manifest in larger settings, right? I actually believe that the Western world, or whatever it's worth, right, for a lack of better terminology, is existing in a very masculine, inculcating
Yeah.
fashion, right? In a way that the Eastern world is not, or in a way that agricultural societies don't, right?
Yes.
So that being said, there are also unhealed versions of masculinity and unhealed versions of femininity. And me and you have talked about that before. we won't
Yes.
get we won't get into that, but yeah, that's the gist of that. Now to go back and answer or get into what you had inquired about earlier is that pre-work societies in that is both indigenous cultures and cultures of the Caribbean, cultures of sub-Saharan Africa, and overall just the African continent at large before its Christianization and before the inculcation or the permeative effect that the Islamic religion had in Africa and also in Native America, right? There are people who existed, different people who identified, uh, who were tribal affiliated that believed that that gender or that people, how do I say this? That people existed in two spirit form, which is what you were alluding to
Yeah.
earlier, right?
Yes.
Existed this sense of duality, right? Especially when referring to people who we would now consider to be transgender, who we would now to consider to be intersex, right? We've now ascribed these people specific names like homosexuals, like gay, like bisexuals, right? Punks, faggots, and all the above, right? We have names for them, but people in prehistoric societies regarded those as people with a sense of duality, right? And people who
Fluidity. Yeah.
fluidity, right? And people who ought to be venerated and were appraised for the duality of their being, right?
Yeah.
That is how they regarded them. I know in Native society, as somebody who is Native American, has Native American lineage, um, that is what we would refer to as two spirit, a person who is two spirit. And you're right, what you said earlier is accurate. People who were priests and were two spirits were venerated, were appraised, were thought of in high regards because the disdain for two spirit people did not exist until you know who came around. So yeah,
We know who. We ain't got to say the name. Yes, they were sought after. These people went to them to find out what strategy would work better for them to win a battle, to go to war. That's how powerful these people were. So to zoom to today and see how much disdain and hate that people have for people who are more two-spirited, I don't know, it bothers me. I feel like people don't read, they don't pick up a book. And that's why we're here today, to deconstruct. Period. I wanted to touch on how women and men uphold misogyny and homophobia, especially in pop culture.
ooh,
Ooh.
ooh, ooh,
Faves are problematic.
the bros.
Some of your faves are problematic. One of my faves is problematic too, so but it is what it is.
Y'all face is homophobic. Y'all face is misogynistic. Y'all face is sexist. Y'all face is even racist sometimes. Y'all face is all of the above. And
Got to
you
be able to point it out. Got to be able to call it out.
are aiding and abetting in the reverberative effects that those attitudes, behavior, things, concepts, and entities are perpetrating in this society. Pop culture. I don't know. You can you think of anything?
Yes, I have a list. So, Christian Rock. I remember you saying something about her baby and the fear of him growing up being. And this is what I mean when I say homo. Y'all are scared. You scared. You scared.
Y'all scared.
That's why it is phobic. That's why the root word is there. You're scared.
I didn't think we was gonna call out names, but here, yeah, Christian Rock, that was homophobic. I think for the people who don't know, I think at one point she said that in the early stages of her child's life, and I think even now the child still, if I'm not mistaken, is still a baby, right? That she was dressing or exuded masculine characteristics so that her child would not embrace femininity or be feminine at one point. And when I read that, I said, but that's a baby.
Hello.
So y'all talk about how it's an agenda to inculcate or to brand your children in a particular fashion. But what this sounds like to me is an agenda to brand your child in a particular fashion manner.
Mm-hmm.
No. And
Absolutely.
what are you so scared?
That you cannot embody masculine energy. I mean, yes, you could. But come on, Krishan.
Girl, she need to be worried about other things. No shade.
Therapy. You cannot embody neither energy for your child. You're not even tapped in emotionally. But okay.
Get into it. Let me get my charger because my phone about to, I'll never.
No. Go ahead. I'll talk to the two people that's on here. How y'all doing? How y'all feel about this live? Are you learning something?
Why y'all so quiet?
Y'all is quiet. Quiet child. This is the most quiet live I had.
It's quiet. Ain't no back talk.
Quiet. Ain't no back talk.
Shout out to all the baddies in Atlanta, Georgia.
Boosie in the color purple, girl.
Ooh. Child, not Boosie in the color purple.
I'm so sick of him. Like, did you not watch the original movie?
He must have not, and I know damn well he ain't read that book.
It's like at some point I feel like people are homophobic for fun. Like, you had to have watched the movie. You knew.
You know damn well Boosie ain't watched that movie before.
Please. And he's so problematic.
Girl, Boosie.
Like, homophobia should be the last of your worries. Didn't you put like sex workers on your son?
You know what? You know what? I think at one point I went on a rant and I wrote it down somewhere. I might be able to find it out. I was just airing out I might find it. I was airing out everybody who I felt was homophobic.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see if I can find it so I can read it out.
Please find it.
Because this will answer this question. Okay, I see. Foremostly, referring to someone as a gay best friend and allowing them to exist in obscurity is homophobic. Having to make disclaimers to your partner about your friend being gay is homophobic. Allowing your parents to mistreat your siblings or family because of their gender or sexual orientation is homophobic. Referring to black men as sassy homophobic. Referring to Drake as zesty or sassy is homophobic. Duke Dennis vulgarizing and weaponing the word gay is homophobic. Disclaiming the fact that you ain't that gay shit, quote unquote, is homophobic. Overly professing greatness, the attack emojis and language when met with a gay person is homophobic. The baby is homophobic. Conflating sexual misconduct, molestation, STDs, and AIDS with gay folks is homophobic. Invalidating bisexual men's masculinity is homophobic. I don't give a fuck what your preference is, bitch. Referring to yourself as a real quote-unquote woman dismisses and invalidates trans women and is homophobic. Intentionally misgendering somebody is homophobic. That's the man. No, baby, that's a bad bitch, and she better than you. You're homophobic. Making comments about how you envy men for having better eyelashes or physical attributes than you when you are a woman is homophobic. Being okay with gay people who aren't that gay or are not gay out loud is homophobic. Encouraging or suggesting that your gay friends morph into straight people in circumstances or scenarios for your appeasement is homophobic. Krishan Rock publicly stating that she dresses masculine around her child who is a baby to deter him from being feminine is homophobic. Y'all favorite rappers is homophobic. 21 Savage is homophobic. Boosie is still a hot mess and it's homophobic. Gender reveals are stupid and dumb. They're homophobic. Interacting with people on they are masculine presenting and doing away with their interaction where they are feminine presenting is homophobic. Telling gay people that you love them but you hate their lifestyle because it's haram or sinful is homophobic. Y'all bitches pop y'all pussy on Instagram every day, eat pork, and do all kinds of sinful things. Y'all, it's homophobic. I love the sinner, hate the sin rhetoric. It's homophobic. Saying things like, I don't care if you're gay, that's your business, not mine, is willfully ignorant and homophobic. You should care. You should make it your business to understand somebody you love. You're homophobic. Not greeting or addressing your girlfriend's gay friends is homophobic. Existing in the obscurity of straightness and being proximal to straightness and having the privilege to exist as a straight man when you really eat ass and do the best is homophobic. Disregarding flamboyant gay men but embracing your friend who plays the game with you or watches anime with you at 2 a.m. in the morning because they're chill is still homophobic. Cosplaying as a queer person, queer baiting when your track record gives very straight is homophobic. Staying quiet and not saying anything about queerness, not bringing shit up is homophobic. Y'all is what?
Homophobic.
Homophobic. Ah!
Bars. Not the tongues. I'm weak.
Girl, look, even the spider got mad at me, child. It's still here.
Bars. Okay. That was hot. That was hot.
Must we
But
say? Must
huh?
we say anything else?
No.
Oh,
You said it all.
okay.
You said it all.
Let me keep going.
Okay. So we got two more questions and we're done.
Okay.
So how do misogyny and homophobic dynamics manifest within queer communities?
Ooh.
And can you expound on biphobia?
That's a good question. Not you flipping the script. I love that for me and for you. So this is also This is also a thing. I think it's salient to this conversation in particular. It's pertinent to the conversation of just social hierarchies and social standing and positionality existing in all communities. That being said, I think it's better that I give examples as opposed to give like some scholarly oriented answer. I think, well, for one, racism and colorism still exists within the queer community, right? The queer community is very adamant and dictates who gets to be soft and flamboyant, right? Darker skinned individuals aren't necessarily afforded the ability, at least socially, right, to be soft or to be flamboyant, whereas light skinned individuals are. Black and brown people, as opposed to non-black and brown people, white people, or even non-black people, period, are afforded the ability to be soft and to be caressing and to be, like, yeah, to be like flamboyant and stuff like that. I also think that hierarchies are oncurring as well in the queer community. Trans women, and this is the point that we made earlier, right? That we exist in social positionalities, and that is pertinent and salient to conversation of this context. Trans women are subject to rebuke and neglect in disproportionate ways, right? Even from the very inception of the queer gay movement in the late 20th century, trans women, if you know anything about the history there, trans women have consistently been rebuked and neglected. And for one, by heteronormative people, right? People who abide by heteronormativity, but as well by other queer individuals, right?
Mm-hmm.
Particularly white queer men, right? And you can imagine that black trans women, right, or trans women of color, experience that neglect and that rebuke in a different capacity, right, at a different caliber, as well as in that same thread, feminine presenting individuals are deemed as abominable in the queer community. And I think that's something that a lot of heterosexual cisgender people don't know, is that feminine presents being feminine presenting even within the queer community is frowned upon, and you are subject to I don't know, like subject to hatred, to violence, being deemed as abominable, things like that. Also, something that I feel is important, because you talked about biphobia, queer women and bisexual men um, in the queer community experience invalidation, right? Or are over, their experiences are invalidated or bypassed due to a number of stereotypes that invalidate the facts. It's the whole Issa Rae Insecure episode, right? A man can't be bisexual.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as he touch he's gay, right? That is incredibly invalidating not only in a heteronormative context, but also it exists and it happens and it occurs in a very incriminate and disgraceful way in the queer community. Uh, that being said, although bisexual men and queer lesbian women are invalidated in their experiences, which is awful and is disdainful and disserviceable for the work that we have to do moving forward, queer women and bisexual men also exist in this proximity to straightness, right? Or in this proximity to masculinity in a way that feminine presenting and trans individuals do not. And I think it's important to create that distinction because although there was a lot of conversation around biphobia and bisexuality and how often invalidated or is deemed as irredeemable, there is still a level of proximity to straightness that aids one in participating in heteronormative society, right? That before others provides for you a level of protection.
Right.
So outside of that, yeah, that's how I want to answer your question. So those definitely exist. I think I just named a few examples. So, what you think?
Um, hold on. Let me read this last question to see if it goes along with that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It doesn't. Okay, so I had the thought of toxic masculinity. I think I had the memory of someone saying, because there was a viral TikTok, and it was a heterosexual man who carried around a YSL purse. And a lot of the girls were saying how that's feminine, that's sassy, that's zesty, that's what we know what you're trying to imply, girl. You're not being that circumcised. But I made the comment of saying that we cannot complain about toxic masculinity while upholding it, right? And so the girlies with no nuance responded, toxic masculinity, that has nothing to do with toxic masculinity. It's how you behave around other women and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, you're missing the point. You're missing the context. You're missing the nuance. First of all, if sexuality was solely dependent upon how one presents themselves, that wouldn't fucking make sense because there's a lot of masculine presenting men, like you said, there are bisexual people who benefit from heteronormative structures, right? There are gay men who present themselves as masculine. So already you're not making sense. But also, it does feed into toxic masculinity because you're restricting who and what can present themselves as both feminine and masculine. It also adds into the saying of, being feminine. Like, I don't know about y'all, but I would want to be with someone who is nurturing, feminine, who is empathetic, feminine, who is compassionate, feminine. Do you not want these things in a relationship? Like, I'm confused. So yeah, they are interconnected with toxic masculinity, and those who don't understand it don't see how all of these things are interwoven and interconnected. They all matter, and they all need to be treated as such.
What we talked about earlier. But the girls live for the trade.
They live for the trade, baby.
They live for the trade.
They live for the trade.
They hood. I ain't checked before. He better be.
Long story short, I had to get out that conversation because the girls was pissing me off a little bit. I had to go. I said bye. Like, there are some people, like you said, are committed to willful ignorance. So good luck. Good luck. If you have sons, good luck. Anywho, this might be triggering. Mm-hmm. Expound on how homophobia and misogyny are rooted in white supremacist evangelical Christianity.
Ooh, you got this. This is your expertise.
I want to see your answer.
No. Go. Well, we talked about it earlier, right? Uh,
Yeah.
we talked about it earlier. You know, white supremacy and people who subscribe to a particular brand of Christianity or just usually live by particular doctrinal mandates and commandments, not to allude to any particular religion specifically, right? But through existing in that part of your identity that procreates and that is contributive to the permeation and the prevailing of misogyny and homophobia. We talked about this earlier, and we also said that these are deficits of early white civilizations that came to be for the sole reason, for the sole purpose of suppression, malignancy, and execration. So I think we answered this question. Um, yeah, I think we answered the question already, but I know that this is one of your areas of expertise, and you be reading because I be watching you, cousin. You be reading the girl. One thing about you is you gonna connect it to white supremacy and evangelical Christianity. So, former minister, former certified minister. I'm gonna let you expound on this. So, Miss Kyra, how does homophobia? What did you ask? Homophobia and misogyny
Rooted in white supremacist evangelical Christianity. Well, like you said, we did talk about this earlier, how pre-patriarchal standards, this was not a thing. Homophobia was not a thing. Misogyny was not a thing. It had to be done in order for those in political power to stand a chance. Because at the time, there was such thing as matriarchal societies where everything was put in villages. We were agriculture by nature. We valued nature. We valued the things that we don't value now. We valued women. We valued childbirth. We valued the things that are feminine and things that, we stray away from that aren't, celebrated today. And what I will say about Christianity, homophobia, and misogyny is we all know that's all up in there, all up and through there. But I also heard that King James was bi. But we can.
No, I never heard that. Hold on.
I heard that. I heard he was bi.
Hold on, cause
I heard it on several different occasions. Do you hear me?
But you know what's crazy? Shout out to King James foremostly. I don't read the iteration of the Bible actually.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also a practicing Christian. I think also what's funny, what's ironic, is that homophobia and these homoerotic things are inscribed in history and in literature dating way back into Western society.
Mm-hmm.
The Romans, the British, right? Many of their most prominent leaders engaged in homoerotic behavior and had partners of the same sex. And that was also published, right? There are legitimate documentation in inscriptions that indicate that Roman emperors and the Greek engaged in queer behavior, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for Western society to then take a turn, it's funny because they were acclimated to homonormativity, not homonormativity.
Heteronormativity.
Yeah, and then there's published works and public archives that indicate that it was homosexuality and that these nuances around gender also existed. But then come 2,000 years, Catholicism and
You got to ask who it benefits. Who was in power? Who was put in power during that time? Why was it such a political stance to make during that time? I'll let y'all do the homework on that. Last question.
Okay.
What does it look like to stand in solidarity with the queer community?
Child, this is always the last question for anything. You know, I've engaged and had the luxury and the privilege to participate in a number of speaking engagement conferences or just conversations of this caliber. And I think this question always comes up, or some brand or iteration of this question is brought up. Um, for one, I have an icky relationship with the question because I like that it's being asked, right? And then at the same time, I don't want to stand in a position or stand as a tenant for a multifaceted community that is diverse in opinion and is diverse in practice and in standing, right? But because I am the queer individual on this live, I think as far as for me, right, I can speak for myself. What I'd like to see is we didn't really talk about these are socio-political issues, right? But there are also political issues, right? There are politics outside of the sociological implications that politics have. But I said this the other day when referencing politics and the issue in Palestine and the genocide. So first of all, free Palestine. Let's start right there.
Period. Free
That's what we say.
Congo.
Free Congo.
Free Sudan. We can go down the list. Hey, you talking about?
Okay. I think oftentimes a lot of these issues, politics, and the queer community feel so distant from us, right? I know growing up, before I was invested into politics, before I was invested into socio-political issues, all these things felt so distant, right? Felt so far astray, that they felt far away. I think the work that we have to do to stand in solidarity, to answer your question, is minimize the distance between us and politics, minimize the distance between us and the queer community, right? Minimize the distance between you and the queer community, right? Minimize the distance between you and the gay people that exist in your immediate spaces, vicinities, and quotidian life, right? There are hindrances and there are blockades and there are institutional deficits that exist that create distance between you and queer people, that create and foment distance between you and politics. But there are also choices that you can make to minimize, right, and shorten the ampleness of that distance that exists, right? A few things that you can begin to do is address people as they would like to be addressed, right? Refer to people how they would like to be referred to, right? It wouldn't be right to call you an Asian woman because are you an Asian woman? No, right? Identify as an Asian woman? No. So address people as they would like to be addressed. The days of punk, faggots, and dykes is over, Bookie. Like, eliminate that from your vocabulary. Also, I think in the conversation of solidarity, cut people off as a sign of solidarity. I feel like sometimes, I feel like sometimes we feel like solidarity only exists in this like inclusive sense, right? In order to stand in solidarity with somebody, you must include somebody. You can also exclude somebody to manifest your solidarity with somebody else, right? And I'm all for that. Cut people off as a sign of solidarity.
Yeah.
Check your rhetoric. Check language. Language is important. Language is ever evolving. Um, our people fought to read. Our people fought to like so so many things. Fought to have opinions. Died to have opinions. Died after having opinions. Right. So check your rhetoric. I think also, and I know I said I didn't like this question as much because I didn't want to be a tenant for all queer individuals, but now I'm going on a rampage about the very many variegated things and initiatives that we can take, but also action, right? Action, conventional action backed up by unconventional action. And that is a very politics token term, right? By conventional action, there are things like voting, right?
Okay.
Voting would be conventional acting, right? Participating in elections is conventional action. Running for public office is conventional action. Things that are institutionalized that help, um, that help, right? Help, and backed up by unconventional action. Unconventional action is like protests, right? Donating, those things, right? And then lastly, so I can stop talking, is identify who is on your side and who is not. A lot of the work that we get caught up in is existing in misunderstandings of who is against you and who is not, right? um, and that requires or calls upon introspective thinking, and just being communally oriented. Who is on your side? Who is not? I promise you, queer people is not against you.
Right.
So yeah, let me shut up because yeah, I think like
Yeah. I want to. Sorry, I'm looking at this ladybug on my on my window, but I just wanted to like summarize by basically saying the reason why I talked about this is because I can't be a healer, a self-proclaimed healer, and not address these types of issues. And they don't stop at journaling and doing internal work and personal development and shadow work. Like I said, while individual work is key, right? It is important when it comes to community and making healing like this vast thing, making sure that the world moves into a healing direction, it needs to be talked about. Not only that, it can't just stay here. It needs to be in a community effort, but also a political effort, because it does not matter how much we heal down here. The people at the top also need to do the work so that it trickles down to us so that we can make changes.
absolutely, absolutely. Politics invariably informs everybody, and I commend somebody like you who has charged themselves with the duty, or you have tasked with being a tenant for healing, and healing that is progressive, and healing that is um, overarching and inclusive, and that's beauteous. That's beautiful. I think a lot of this is healing. A lot of this is healing. A lot of this is righting wrongs. A lot of this is just a process. A lot of this is time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, absolutely. In politics, like I said, invariably, inadvertently, even sometimes
It's
inform
the core. It's the center.
everything. And we've talked about this too before. I know you said that at one point your work didn't necessarily orient itself in politics until you were introduced to different political things. You began to connect the dots. Well, let me tell you something. Politics is
Everything. It's
everything.
everywhere.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think what really got me going was when I read the book Hood Feminism by Mickey Kendall. And I also read a chapter out of Bell Hooks' book called, oh, what is that book called? The Will to
The
Change.
real situation.
And yeah, they both hit on how, particularly black and brown people, hell, even white people, hell, everybody isn't impacted by the politics. So no, you didn't manifest and create poverty. People have been struggling with poverty before you were born. You feel me? So like healing from that rhetoric, like you attracted that, you were born into it, you called that in. Did I really call it in, or is
No,
it the structures that we have to abide by in order to survive?
somebody made you believe that was your doing, when in fact it was not.
So do y'all see what I'm talking about when I say personal development in individualism and individual healing can only take you so far before you hit a brick wall, because it's not
Yes,
you.
it's not you.
It's not you.
We talked about this earlier, even when I was answering that question earlier about what things can we do. I said there are institutional hindrances that already exist, but it is incumbent upon you and I to minimize the distance between us and these issues at hand, despite the fact that hindrances and blockades are meant to diminish that relationship, right? To
Yes.
do away with your enlightenment, right? Those exist. And those are, you are not in control of that, right? We are born into things.
Yes.
Things, and that's the way it is. But you know, like you said, there's only so much we can do on an individual level. This is a matter of, this is a global matter. This is an issue. It's an overarching, multifaceted, variegated issue.
And to put it in perspective, and we'll get off, but to put it in perspective, if people at the top aren't doing the work like we are, right? These are people in charge of making laws. These are people in charge of hiring you. These are people in, like, do you not understand how grand that concept is?
That you are held to.
My life is in the hands of someone who doesn't have the empathy past a fucking third grader. Well, actually, let me stop, because children are typically no, yeah. I didn't mean it like that. That's what's like, you know what? Let me stop, because children are typically empathetic until they get programmed and conditioned to do all these other things. But what I meant is like their, what's Maslow's hierarchy? Self-realization. It's like they're stunted. It's stunted growth. Yep. They have not grown. They have not matured. They're not conscious. It's like the fact that my life, the laws that are being made are in the hands of people like that, who are not consciously evolved, is like really concerning. It really is. But yeah, any last thoughts from my fellow cousin?
I don't think so. I think we covered an ample range of things. I'm happy. I'm excited. I am honored you would even call upon me to have this conversation with you. I know how much it means to you to do the work of social deconstruction, and to I also commend you, and it's beauteous that you have charged yourself and your life and your immediate spaces with doing this work, right? Particularly as it pertains to issues like homophobia and misogyny and racism, because sometimes it feels like they're ever prevailing. And at the end of the day, all it takes is a challenge, right? All it takes is somebody with the will and the guts to challenge what feels wrong, and trust there is more than one individual, but you in particular. This is so admirable, and thank you for having me. When she was like, I would like you to hop on it, we didn't even plan for this for real. No. we didn't practice this for real. We were like, we're gonna get on there and just talk like me and you.
Talk like how we talk on the phone.
Look, can I be a little ratchet? She's like, yeah, do you just be you. So yeah, I don't have any final thoughts. I'm immensely grateful.
I'm honored that you came on here, and honestly, you are a testament to my growth as an individual. You've seen how much I've grown, because I was not talking like this a year ago. I really wasn't. Like, there was so much I had to like challenge within myself and deconstruct within myself. Then I realized, holy shit, like, I can't be talking about healing if I don't go this route. Like, now I'm obligated. Now it's my responsibility. My responsibility, now that I have conscious awareness of this, I have to put it in practice. I have to share it. I can't ethically call myself a healer and not do that.
Absolutely.
Where can the people find you? Are there any, and after that, are there any projects that you have going on that people should know about?
Girl, the people can find me out in Third Ward, out in the street. If I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, y'all see me in Atlanta. Shout out to Kansas City, Missouri. Shout out to Kansas City, Kansas.
Shout out to CAU, period. Clark, Atlanta. What's up? What do you do?
Shout out to the AU Center. For one, you can really find me out in these streets in Houston. Shout out to you can find me on Instagram, right? I am working on a public platform. I'm working on a website. So I don't have any definitive date when that will be finalized. And I'm working on my website, and you should be able to find that at one point if you follow me. You can also follow me on Instagram at ARROYONIEL. I talks all the things, right? We talks all the things on there. I am working on a few projects actually that I'm looking to be endorsed by particular. I don't want to put anything out there just yet, but I'm working on a project titled Drawing the Line at Trans, which is an analysis of Black and brown attitudes towards transgender politics and transgender policies. That works. It's still in a very preliminary phase. I hope that I can take that into my PhD studies and future grad school iterations can come out of that. I've also just finalized a project that goes by the name of a gender politics, which aims to assess Black and brown evaluations of Black women candidates and brown women candidates. That is finalized, so that should be, if God permits, that should be out there soon. Other than that, you don't come to me for as a tenant for some of this information. If you don't come to me as for this information, go to Kyra right there. There are people, because I think oftentimes as like Black and brown people, we want people that feel proximal. We want to receive this in doses. We want to receive a lot of this information in ways that feels proximal to our upbringing, to our being, to our identity. There are marvelous individuals out there. You can read tons of literature about gender politics. I know Kyra can list a number of authors and people out there as far as that. On Instagram, if you want to kiki, and you want a little politics and a little some, you should definitely follow T.S. Madison. People like Hope Giselle, our people. So yeah.
Yes. Janae asks, love this. First of all, thank you for watching. She asked, do y'all have any reading recommendations? Nia, do you have any?
Ooh! Any reading recommendations for gender and misogyny? I can't think of any off the top of my head. I can certainly foment, and Janae follows me, and I know her as well. She's my friend. I can certainly foment a list following this live and post it on my Instagram page. I can't think. I'm really bad at names. And you know this. I'm really bad at names. So none that I can think off the top of my head. I don't know. Can you think of anything?
Okay, so on my Instagram, I have highlight reels, and one of the highlight reels says books. So I've been posting books that I've personally read, and usually I will review them. I just don't post them in my highlights. But if you go to my Instagram and you go to the highlight reels that says books, you will see it. I'm trying to think, because there was one specifically about gender fluidity. And one is called Beyond the Gender Binary. And this person is, I don't know his race, but he's not Black. He's for sure brown. But Beyond the Gender Binary is good. He challenges the narratives, and it really gets you understanding about, things that you wouldn't necessarily think about. I also love The Will to Change by Bell Hooks. I love this fucking book. I have to read it again, but The Will to Change by Bell Hooks. I'm currently reading When God Was a Woman, and that's the author that I was talking about earlier, where she goes into depth talking about before, pre-colonial structures and patriarchal structures and all of that. But the book I want to read after that is Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, and I feel like she's gonna go into a little bit about masculinity.
Absolutely.
And
that's a good book.
Read it? Does she go into depth about like masculinity and how Black men, you know what I'm trying to say? How Black men were basically,
oh yeah, like over masculinized.
Yeah.
I think so. Also, I just opened my because a lot of the reading that I do is in reference to my work and my research. So I do a lot of referencing reading and manuscripting and stuff like that. So I have citations on here from my past work. if you're more like inclined to read about research and things that are like scholarly oriented, there's this book called Hegemony and Heteronormativity,
Mm.
which is about queer politics. It's like a queer politics Bible. That is by, the name escapes me, but it's Hegemony and Heteronormativity. There's this other book that is called The Politics of Queer Erasure, which talks about erasing queerness in the public school system. And I think that's a banned book in Florida. So,
Florida is
so
showing their
girls,
ass.
Florida is showing their ass.
Wow.
And there is a book that I live by, if I can remember, that is called Queer Politics in an American context. I think it's Queer Politics in an American Context. That's all things politics. Yeah, those are the ones that I reference most in my literature and my research. Yeah, and a lot of articles. I could go on and list articles, but those aren't books.
It's of articles. Yeah, that was pretty much the end of the live. Thank you everyone for joining in. Hopefully I'll be able to see your comments towards the end, because I do plan on saving it and putting it up on YouTube. Because that's basically what I'll be doing on my YouTube channel, is connecting the dots between systemic issues, oppression, political stances, and healing. Because healing, you can't heal without also considering those things that center our oppression and our trauma. But yes, you could follow Niel. You could also follow me. Also understand that we're also learning. Like I'm a baby in the game for real. Like I just started talking politics. You feel me? So I just wanted to.
Yeah, this disclaimer, I also don't have a PhD yet.
Yet.
So
We get there. We get there though.
We are just out here, living our experiences and doing the work of social deconstruction, and not living in performativity.
Heavy on the not living in performativity. Recognize a real bitch when you see one.
Okay. Game recognized game.
No, but I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and I love you, cousin. And I hope we get to have more conversations going forward.
Absolutely.
Bye, y'all.